One cold winter morning, Ethan Parker, a regular barista at a small coffee shop, gave a free cup of hot coffee to a homeless man shivering outside his door. A few hours later, 3 men in luxurious suits suddenly entered the bar, found Ethan, and revealed a shocking secret. The homeless man turned out to be none other than the father of a powerful CEO. Ethan's small act of kindness opens an unexpected door, taking him into a whole new world he never dreamed of. But can an ordinary bartender cross the threshold, that door, and change your destiny? Welcome to Kindness Stories, where small acts of kindness create big miracles. Today we're going to tell you a surprising story that started with a free cup of coffee on a cold morning. Let's find out what happened next and why sometimes a single act of kindness can change a life. The city slowly woke up in the mist of a winter morning. The weak rays of sunlight filtered through the tall buildings, not enough to dispel the biting cold. The streets were bustling as usual, but the haste of passers-by and the white smoke coming from their breath added to the chilliness of the early morning. Inside the Warm Brew coffee shop, Ethan Parker was preparing to start his shift. Ethan was a young man in his early 20s with bright eyes and a warm smile. As a longtime barista at the shop, Ethan was always the first to arrive, carefully cleaning the counter and preparing the coffee machine. The steady hum of the bean grinder was like a familiar morning rhythm, the fragrant smell of coffee permeating the cozy space of the shop. The cafe isn't big, but it's always busy. Warm Brew is located on a downtown corner, a popular stop for people rushing to work or looking for warmth in the cold weather. Ethan enjoys his job because it gives him the opportunity to meet all kinds of people. Sometimes the smiles or words of thanks from customers are enough to make his day worthwhile. This morning, as customers began to arrive, a slow silhouette outside the glass door caught Ethan's attention. An older man, wearing a worn-out coat and faded heels, stood in the doorway, shivering from the cold, his hands thrust deep into his pockets for warmth. Ethan recognized the haggard look on the man's face and the shy look in his eyes as he glanced inside the shop. Ethan quickly made a cup of hot coffee, the steam rising from it invitingly. He walked to the door, opened it, and smiled. "Here, Uncle, it's too cold to stand outside," Ethan said, holding out the cup to him. The man looked at Ethan with a look of surprise and emotion. He held the coffee cup with trembling hands, his lips moving as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. In the end, he just nodded slightly, his voice small and hoarse. "Thank you, you're so kind." Ethan just smiled, shrugged, and returned to the bar. To him, it was a small, insignificant gesture. He continued his work, not knowing that this free cup of coffee would open a whole new chapter in his life. As the morning wore on, Warm Brew continued to bustle with people. Ethan Parker, his hands nimble, continued to make coffee and serve customers. The hum of the coffee machine mingled with the jingle of the door opening and closing. Ethan smiled at a regular customer as he handed her a steaming cup of latte and turned back to the counter. Everything was going smoothly, until around noon when the atmosphere in the shop suddenly changed. The glass door swung open, and a group of 3 men in black suits walked in. They were not the usual Warm Brew patrons who were in a hurry with loose ties and take-out coffees. These 3 men moved slowly, deliberately. They carried themselves with a strange dignity that made all eyes in the shop turn to them. Ethan paused in his work and looked up. He frowned slightly, sensing that something was wrong. Maybe they're in the wrong place, he thought. This small coffee shop wasn't the kind of place where wealthy businessmen or celebrities would hang out. The man at the head of the group appeared to be the oldest, in his mid-50s, with neatly combed gray hair and sharp, observant eyes. He wore an impeccable black suit and a dark blue tie that gave him an air of authority and confidence. The other 2 were younger, but they shared the same serious, professional demeanor. The older man walked up to the counter, stopping in front of Ethan. He straightened up, trying to keep his composure. "Hello, are you Ethan Parker?" the man asked, his voice deep and clear. Ethan was startled. He nodded, his voice a little hesitant. "Yes, it's me," What's the matter?" The man looked deep into Ethan's eyes, as if assessing him. After a brief moment, he gave a small but meaningful smile. "Can we talk in private? It won't take much of your time." Ethan hesitated for a moment. He glanced around the bar, where a few customers were watching curiously. The manager stood behind the counter, nodding in agreement. Ethan let out a sigh of relief and stepped away from the counter, leading the group to a secluded table in the corner of the bar. As they sat down, the older man pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table in front of Ethan. He glanced at it, his eyes widening as he read the words, "Strength and Healing Hearthrugs, Harvo, America." Owen read the name through 2 or 3 times. "Harlow Enterprises?" Ethan repeated, suddenly feeling a sense of familiarity. It was the name of one of the largest corporations in the United States, operating in many fields from technology to real estate to financial services. The man smiled slightly. "I am William Bennett, Senior Assistant to CEO David Harlow," he introduced. "We are here on an important matter concerning you." Ethan's eyes widened, completely confused. "What does it have to do with me? I don't understand. I'm just a barista." William leaned forward, his voice slow but full of weight. "Do you remember the homeless man you helped this morning?" Ethan paused, the memory of the shaggy-haired man flashing clearly in his mind. "Yes, I remember. But what does that have to do with anything?" "That man's name is Richard Harlow," said William. "He's CEO David Harlow's father." Ethan was stunned, his eyes wide with shock. "What? No way!" His voice choked. William nodded, his seriousness never fading. "Last night, Mr. Richard left home and his family couldn't find him. He met you this morning, and your act of kindness moved him and made him believe that there are still good people in this world. Afterwards, Mr. Richard called his son, and Mr. David asked us to find you." Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling everything around him spin. He never thought something as simple as giving a cup of coffee would lead to such a strange chain of events. William continued, "David Harlow would like to see you, Ethan. He believes your kindness deserves to be rewarded. We are authorized to bring you to Harlow Enterprises headquarters tomorrow, if you agree." Ethan looked down at the business card in front of him, conflicted. He was an ordinary bartender, living an ordinary life. Now, an opportunity was opening up before him, bigger than he could have imagined. "You may consider this offer," William said, breaking the silence. "But remember, not everyone has the opportunity to change their life with just one act of kindness." Ethan was silent, his mind in turmoil. In a corner of the shop, the weak sunlight filtered through the window, shining on his pensive face. Deep down, Ethan knew that things would never be the same again. After the group left, Ethan sat absent-mindedly at the corner of the table, his eyes glued to the business card that read harlowenterprises.com. What had just happened was like a strange dream, too far removed from his daily life. Could a free cup of coffee lead to such a strange event? He shook his head, trying to calm down, but the feeling of confusion refused to let go. That afternoon, as Ethan continued his work, he kept thinking about William Bennett's offer. Deep down, he felt that this was no joke. The homeless man, Richard Harlow, was actually the father of one of the most famous businessmen in America. But why would they want to meet him? What could a common bartender like him do for such a large corporation? The thought both excited and scared Ethan. When his shift ended, Ethan sat alone in the now empty coffee shop. His manager, a middle-aged woman named Linda, walked over and sat across from him. Linda had worked at Warm Brew for nearly 10 years, and she had always treated Ethan like a little brother. "Are you okay?" Linda asked, her eyes filled with concern. Ethan sighed, holding up his business card. "They want to see me, Linda. Some kind of opportunity from Harlow Enterprises. I don't know what to do." Linda smiled, her expression gentle but serious. "Ethan, "You are a good boy. Not everyone is as kind as you were this morning. Maybe this is a fitting reward for you. But what you decide to do is up to you. Sometimes life opens doors unexpectedly, and it is our job to walk through them." Linda's words made Ethan pause in thought. He wasn't the type of person who dreamed of success or wealth. His life was simple, revolving around the small coffee shop and his regular customers. But somewhere deep down, Ethan felt he could do more. Perhaps it was time for him to learn more about himself. The next morning, Ethan stood in front of the Harlow Enterprises headquarters building in the other side of the West River, where he was expected to build the business part of the Glowfly. It was a glass skyscraper that gleamed with sunlight. Ethan looked up, feeling strangely familiar. His clothes, a light blue shirt and simple khakis, seemed too ordinary for the glitz of the place. "Come on, Ethan," he told himself, taking a deep breath before stepping in. The lobby of the building was large and luxurious, with warm yellow lighting and polished marble floors. The receptionist greeted Ethan with a professional smile before guiding him to the 40th floor, where CEO David Harlow was waiting. As the elevator doors opened, Ethan was greeted by another staff member who led him to a large conference room with glass doors overlooking the city. Ethan felt his legs getting heavy as he entered. At the end of the room, a man in his 40s, dressed in a luxurious black suit, stood with his back to him, looking out at the city. The man turned and smiled slightly. It was David Harlow, CEO of Harlow Enterprises. He was not at all what Ethan had imagined. His face was not cold or distant, but rather calm and composed. "You're Ethan Parker?" David said, his voice deep. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied, trying to keep his composure. David pointed to the chair across from him and motioned for Ethan to sit down. He stepped closer, his eyes observant but also friendly. "Ethan," David began, "my father, Richard Harlow, told me about you. He said that in one of his weakest and most difficult moments, you treated him with kindness and compassion. It was just a cup of coffee, but you did what so many people couldn't do. You saw him as a person." Ethan was silent, his throat tightening at these words. He didn't know what to say other than bow his head. David continued, "My father was a successful businessman, but after a major event, he lost his way and left his family. That morning, thanks to you, he regained his faith in the goodness of people. That made me believe that you are a special person." Ethan raised his head, his eyes filled with doubt. "But I'm just a normal bartender. I don't understand why you're saying these things to me." David chuckled. "Sometimes the most extraordinary people come from the most ordinary places. I want to give you a chance. At Harlow Enterprises, we have a training program for young people with potential. You will learn, be challenged, and grow. I want you to join." Ethan looked at David in surprise, unable to believe his ears. I don't have any special qualifications or skills. Why do you trust me?" David looked at him, his voice firm. "Kindness and integrity are qualities that cannot be taught. You have proven that you have them. Everything else, we can teach you." Ethan was silent, his mind racing with 100 thoughts. This was a huge opportunity, a door that opened onto a whole new path, but he was also afraid that he would fail, that he wasn't worthy. As if reading his mind, David said gently, "I'm not forcing you to decide right away. Think about it. But sometimes opportunities only come once in a lifetime." Ethan took a deep breath. He knew that his peaceful life would change forever if he walked through this door. But would he dare to? "Thank you, sir. I will think about the offer," Ethan replied, his voice firm. David smiled with satisfaction. "I look forward to having you as a part of our team soon." Ethan left the building with a heavy heart, but a new fire lit inside him, a hope for something bigger, more meaningful. Ethan returned to his small apartment that evening, his mind still unable to escape the proposal that CEO David Harlow had made. His room was not large, only a single bed, a small desk, and a few souvenir photos on the wall. From the window, the lights of the city twinkled like lost stars in the night. Harlow Enterprises' business card in his hand and twirling it between his fingers. The thought of joining one of the largest corporations in America filled him with both excitement and fear. Am I good enough? I'm just a bartender. What if I fail? These questions kept running through his mind. Warm Brew Coffee Shop, the place that had been a part of his life for the past 4 years. Here, he learned how to make good coffee, how to chat and please customers. The regular customers, the little stories they shared, the friendly smiles, all made up his simple but meaningful life. But now, the opportunity that David Harlow gave him was like a door leading to a completely different world, a world Ethan never dared to dream of. After a sleepless night, Ethan made a decision. He would try. If I don't try, I'll forever wonder, what if, Ethan told himself. He wrote a letter to Linda and his Warm Brew colleagues, explaining that he needed some time to pursue the new opportunity. The next morning, Ethan walked into the coffee shop for the last time with a feeling of nostalgia. Linda was wiping down the counter as usual. When she saw Ethan walk in with the letter in his hand, she looked at him and smiled, as if she had expected this. "Have you decided?" Linda asked gently. Ethan nodded, his eyes slightly sad. "I think I should try. After all, it's a great opportunity." Linda walked over, put her hand on Ethan's shoulder and smiled. "You'll do fine. Believe in yourself, Ethan." He hugged Linda goodbye and walked out of the cafe. The glass door closed behind him, closing an old chapter and opening a new, challenging path. Ethan began his training at Harlow Enterprises with mixed feelings. On his first day, he was taken to a large conference room with a group of other young people. They were all smartly dressed and confident, a stark contrast to Ethan, who was dressed in a simple shirt. He felt out of place and small among the experienced and ambitious people. A woman named Rachel, the program director, walked into the room and began the introduction. She talked about the program's mission, to find and nurture new talent, regardless of their background or past. "Here, we don't judge you by where you come from, but by how you present yourself," Rachel said, her eyes scanning the room. The next few days passed at a dizzying pace. Ethan was forced to adapt to a whole new set of things: presentations, leadership training, and intense group exercises. At first, he fumbled and made frequent mistakes. One day, while presenting a business idea to the group, Ethan stumbled over his words and missed a key point. The eyes around him were suspicious and he felt like he was drowning. After that session, Ethan almost wanted to give up. He sat alone in the break room, his head in his hands. "I don't belong here. This isn't my world," he thought. Just then the door opened, a deep voice rang out. It was difficult, wasn't it? Ethan looked up and saw Richard Harlow, the homeless man he had helped that day, standing in front of him. Unlike the first time they met, Richard looked neater, with warm clothes and a gentle smile. Mr. Harlow?" Ethan stammered. Richard sat down next to Ethan, his eyes full of understanding. "I know this feeling of being lost. I felt the same way when I entered the business world many years ago." Ethan was silent, listening. Richard continued, "Do you know why you are here? Not because you are better than anyone else, but because you did what no one else did. You saw a person when the rest of the world forgot them." Richard's words were like a ray of light that shone through Ethan's mind. He realized that he didn't have to be like everyone else. His kindness and integrity were his greatest strengths. "I believe in you, Ethan," Richard said, patting him on the shoulder. "You gave me hope, and now give it to yourself." In the days that followed, Ethan gradually regained his confidence. He stopped trying to be perfect and focused on learning and growing every day. He began to offer creative ideas in team meetings and support his colleagues with his inherent sincerity. People began to recognize Ethan as not only different, but also a trustworthy teammate. As the program neared its end, Ethan was given a final project: to propose an idea to improve customer service for the corporation. Drawing on his experience at Warm Brew, Ethan came up with a simple but practical proposal: to bring a more personal and intimate experience to each customer. His idea was highly appreciated by the management and was selected for pilot implementation. That day, as Ethan stood on stage to present his project to the entire leadership team, he felt his heart pounding. But this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from pride and hope. He realized that sometimes the biggest journeys start with small, kind steps. When the presentation ended, David Harlow shook Ethan's hand, his eyes filled with satisfaction. "You did a great job, Ethan. I knew I had not made a mistake." Ethan smiled, feeling like he had truly found a new, stronger version of himself. After a successful presentation, Ethan walked out of the conference room with a sense of relief and pride. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the large glass windows, illuminating the hallway on the top floor of Harlow Enterprises.E. He paused, took a deep breath, and smiled, a smile of self-confidence. That day, David Harlow officially announced that Ethan would be hired to work in the Customer Service Development Department of the corporation. This was no longer a training program, but a real job, an opportunity for Ethan to continue on a new path. A month later, Ethan sat at his desk on the 25th floor of the Harlow Enterprises building. His laptop lit up with emails and reports to process. The mug of coffee he had brewed himself on the table radiated warmth, reminiscent of his days at Warm Brew. The new job was not easy, but Ethan gradually got used to the busy and stressful pace here. His kindness and sincerity helped him build good relationships with colleagues and customers. The service and listening skills he learned from working in a coffee shop now come in handy, helping Ethan generate practical and approachable ideas to improve the customer experience. One late afternoon, as Ethan was wrapping up work, an email popped into his inbox. It was an invitation to the company's year-end party, which would be attended by all senior executives and key employees. Although Ethan was new to such events, he decided to attend. The year-end party was held in a luxurious hall. The sparkling crystal chandeliers reflected light throughout the room. The employees and leaders of the group, dressed in formal attire, raised their glasses to celebrate a successful year. Ethan stood in a corner of the room, his initial feeling of unfamiliarity giving way to pride as he looked back on the journey he had taken. "Not bad at all, young man," a familiar voice said from behind. Ethan turned around and saw Richard Harlow, the man who had changed his life, approaching. Richard looked much healthier and more radiant than when they first met. He was wearing a simple but elegant suit, and his face bore a warm smile. "Mr. Harlow," Ethan exclaimed happily, shaking his hand firmly. "Call me Richard, son," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You did a great job. My father always said that one kind act can change a life, and you proved it." Ethan smiled, scratching his head sheepishly. "Actually, it was you who helped me find my way." Richard shook his head slightly. "No, Ethan. You always had that path in you. You just needed a chance to see it." Amidst the excitement of the party, David Harlow also came up. He put his hand on Ethan's shoulder and said, "You have made us proud, Ethan. From a small cup of coffee, you have brought trust and kindness. Harlow Enterprises always needs people like you, people who bring real value to customers and colleagues." Ethan felt his heart warm. It wasn't just a compliment, but a recognition he never thought he would receive. A week later, Ethan decided to return to Warm Brew Coffee on a Saturday morning. As he pushed open the glass doors and stepped inside, the familiar aroma of coffee immediately enveloped him. Linda stood behind the counter, still wearing her old apron and smiling kindly. "Welcome back, Ethan," Linda said, opening her arms to greet him like a long-lost relative. Ethan walked up to the counter, looking around the shop with a nostalgic look. The old wooden tables, the warm yellow lights, and the regular customers chatting all gave him a peaceful feeling. He placed a bill on the counter and said to Linda, "I want to buy a cup of coffee for anyone who needs it." Linda looked at Ethan, understood what he meant, and smiled. "You're the same as ever. Always kind." Ethan shrugged, smiling slightly. "Some things never change, Linda." He sat down at a table near the window, where he had seen Richard Harlow shivering that cold winter day. Now, outside the window, the warm spring sunshine was shining down on the city, dispelling the cold of the past winter. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, reflecting on the amazing journey that one small act had taken him on. He realized that kindness not only helped others, but also opened new doors for himself. A new customer walked into the shop, his jacket worn and his eyes shy, just like Richard's. Linda, with a gentle smile, approached and handed him a cup of coffee. Ethan watched the scene, his heart lightened. A circle of kindness had been closed, but new ones were opening. Life is like that. Sometimes one small action can change everything, and Ethan knows that this is just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Ethan Parker's story is proof that even small acts of kindness can create miraculous changes. Sometimes just a simple act like giving a cup of coffee can open unexpected doors. Remember, you always have the ability to do something meaningful for others. And who knows, life will also give you an unexpected gift. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread more beautiful stories. See you in the next videos on Kindness Stories, where kindness is told into miracles.